Elderly people, how are you? Times are changing. There are many diseases. Old people like us need to know how to take care of ourselves. As usual, today I am very happy to tell you a very interesting story about 3 black children abandoned by white parents when they were born. What will be the future of these children? Make a cup of ginger tea, leave the number 1 in the comments, and let's go! The morning sun spilled faintly through the narrow windows of Oakwood's Rural Hospital, casting a pale glow over the maternity ward. It was early spring, and a brisk breeze carried the scent of damp earth and budding flowers through the cracked open panes. Inside, the air was thick with a sharp tang of antiseptic, undercut by the faint, sweet musk of new life. The room hummed with the soft beeps of monitors and the occasional rustle of a nurse's starched uniform as she moved between beds. In one corner, separated by a thin curtain, a scene unfolded that no one in this sleepy corner of the world could have predicted. Mrs. Eleanor Brown lay propped on a stiff hospital bed, her auburn hair matted with sweat, clinging to her forehead like damp threads of silk. Her pale cheeks, flushed from hours of labor, glistened under the flickering fluorescent lights. Beside her stood Mr. Thomas Brown, a wiry man with a farmer's tan and hands calloused from years of tending fields. His gray eyes, usually steady, darted nervously around the room, avoiding the 3 tiny bundles now cradled in a shared bassinet. The triplets, 2 girls and a boy, were swaddled in soft white blankets, their small faces scrunched as they let out piercing wails that echoed off the tiled walls. What set them apart, what turned heads and hushed voices, was their skin, a warm, rich brown that glowed softly under the lights, a striking contrast to the ashen pallor of their parents. The head nurse, a stout woman named Marjorie with graying curls pinned tightly beneath her cap, approached with a clipboard clutched to her chest. She'd seen countless births in her 30 years, but this was something else. Healthy as can be, she said, her voice warm but edged with curiosity as she glanced at the Browns. 2 girls and a boy, all strong lungs on them. She paused, expecting the usual tired smiles or teary gratitude from new parents. Instead, Eleanor's breath hitched, and Thomas's jaw tightened, his knuckles whitening as he gripped the bed rail. Eleanor's gaze flicked to the bassinet, then away, her hazel eyes pooling with something unspoken fear, perhaps, or disbelief. She reached for Thomas's hand, her fingers trembling as they brushed his. "Tom," she whispered, her voice so low it barely carried past the curtain, how can this be?" Her words hung in the air, fragile and sharp, like glass about to shatter. Thomas didn't answer right away. He stepped closer to the bassinet, peering down at the triplets as if they were a puzzle he couldn't solve. The boy's tiny fist waved free of his blanket, and one of the girls let out a hiccuping cry. Their brown skin seemed to deepen under his scrutiny, an undeniable truth he couldn't square with his own. Marjorie hovered nearby, her practiced smile faltering. She'd caught the shift in the room, the way the air grew heavy, the way Eleanor's whisper sliced through the usual post-birth chatter. "Everything all right?" she ventured, adjusting her glasses as she studied the couple. Thomas turned sharply, his voice clipped and cold. "We need to speak to the doctor. Now." His tone brooked no argument, and Marjorie nodded, hurrying off with a rustle of her skirt, her footsteps tapping a quick rhythm down the hall. Minutes later, Dr. Henry Sullivan arrived, a wiry man in his 50s with thinning hair and a calm demeanor honed by decades of practice. He carried a chart under one arm, his white coat slightly wrinkled from a long shift. "Mr. and Mrs. Brown," he began, his voice steady as he stood at the foot of the bed, "congratulations again. The babies are perfect, 8 pounds total weight, all vitals strong." He paused, sensing the tension radiating from the couple. "Is there something you'd like to discuss?" Thomas straightened, his shoulders squaring as if bracing for a fight. "Doc, we're white. Both of us. Look at us, then look at them." He jerked his head toward the bassinet, his voice rising with a mix of anger and bewilderment. "You're telling me those are our kids? That's impossible." Eleanor clutched the thin hospital sheet, pulling it up to her chin as if it could shield her from the moment. Her eyes darted to Dr. Sullivan, pleading for an answer that made sense. The doctor adjusted his stance, unfazed by the outburst. He'd heard variations of this before, though never quite so stark. "Genetics can be surprising," he said evenly, flipping open the chart. "It's not uncommon for traits to skip generations. A distant ancestor, maybe a great-grandparent, could carry genes for darker-skinned recessive ones that only show up now and then. It's rare, but it happens. I assure you, these are your children. The blood tests confirm it." "Tests?" Eleanor's voice cracked, barely above a whisper. "You mean there's no mistake?" Her hands twisted the sheet tighter, her knuckles pale against the fabric. Thomas shook his head, pacing a tight line beside the bed. "No. No way. I don't care what your tests say. This ain't right. We can't." He stopped, running a hand through his thinning hair, his breath coming in short, ragged bursts. Dr. Sullivan sighed, closing the chart with a soft snap. "I understand this is a shock. Take some time to process it. We can talk more when you're ready." He offered a small, sympathetic nod before stepping out, leaving the room quieter than before, save for the triplets' soft coos and the distant hum of a janitor's mop down the hall. Thomas turned to Eleanor, his face a mask of resolve. "We can't do this, Elle," he said, his voice low but firm. "3 kids looking like that? People talk. They think." He trailed off, but the implication hung heavy. Infidelity, scandal, a life appended. Eleanor's eyes welled up, tears spilling silently down her cheeks. "But they're ours, Tom," she murmured, her voice breaking. "What are we supposed to do?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he crossed to the window, staring out at the rolling fields beyond, their green tips just catching the morning light. The silence stretched, thick and suffocating, until he finally spoke. "We leave him. Sign whatever we gotta sign and go. They're better off with someone else, someone who can handle this." His words landed like stones, each one sinking deeper into the room as stillness. Eleanor gasped, a hand flying to her mouth. "Tom, no, you can't mean that." Her voice trembled, but he didn't. He turned back. "I do," he said, his tone final. "We're not cut out for this. You know it as well as I do." She stared at him, then at the triplets, her chest heaving with shallow breaths. The boy stirred, his tiny lips parting in a yawn, and one of the girls kicked a foot free, revealing a curl of dark hair against her forehead. Eleanor's resolve crumbled. She nodded, a single jerky motion, and buried her face in her hands. By midday, the decision was made. Marjorie returned with a stack of papers, her face etched with quiet dismay as she explained the process. "You're sure about this?" she asked, her pen hovering over the forms. Thomas nodded curtly, signing his name in a jagged scrawl, while Eleanor added hers with a shaking hand, tears smudging the ink. The nurse took the papers, her lips pressing into a thin line, and glanced at the triplets one last time. Their cries had softened to whimpers, their small bodies nestled together, as if sensing the shift. As the Browns gathered their things, a worn jacket for Thomas, a quilted bag for Eleanor, the ward buzzed with hushed voices. A young aide, barely 20, leaned close to Marjorie near the nurse's station. "Did you see their faces?" Poor little things, she whispered, her hazel eyes wide. Marjorie shushed her, but her own gaze lingered on the bassinet, a flicker of pity crossing her weathered features. Outside, the Browns climbed into their rusted pickup truck, the engine sputtering to life as they pulled away, leaving behind 3 lives they couldn't or wouldn't claim. Inside, the triplets remained, their futures uncertain, cradled in the sterile embrace of the hospital. The sun climbed higher, bathing the ward in a golden haze, but for those left behind, the day felt colder, quieter, as if the world itself paused to mourn what had been lost. The Davis home stood on a gentle rise at the edge of a quiet suburb, its weathered clapboard siding painted a soft buttery yellow that caught the late afternoon sun. A row of marigolds lined the cracked stone path to the front porch, their golden heads nodding in the breeze. Inside, the air carried the faint aroma of cedar from the polished wood floors, and the lingering warmth of cinnamon from a pie Jessica had baked earlier that day. The living room, modest but welcoming, held a sagging plaid sofa, a coffee table scarred with years of use, and a bookshelf crammed with novels and nursing manuals. A small radio on the mantel crackled with a jazz tune, its notes weaving through the stillness of a house that had long waited for new voices to fill it. Jessica Davis leaned against the kitchen counter, her chestnut hair tied back in a loose bun, strands slipping free to frame her freckled face. At 38, her hands bore the faint calluses of a nurse's life steady from years of stitching wounds and soothing fevers in a bustling clinic 2 towns over. She wore a faded green sweater over her slacks, its hem frayed from too many washes, and sipped from a chipped mug of chamomile tea. Across the room, Michael Davis sat at the dining table, his broad shoulders hunched over a stack of blueprints. A construction manager with a knack for turning rough sketches into sturdy homes, he had the rugged look of someone who spent his days under the sun-tanned skin, a scruffy beard peppered with gray, and deep lines etched around his hazel eyes. His flannel shirt was rolled to the elbows, revealing forearms dusted with sawdust from a morning at the site. They'd been married 15 years, a union forged in quiet resilience after countless failed attempts to start a family. The guest room upstairs, once painted a hopeful pale blue, had sat empty, its crib disassembled and stored in the attic alongside their unspoken grief. But that morning, a call from the social worker at Oakwood's Rural Hospital had shifted something in the air of possibility neither had dared to voice until now. Jessica set her mug down, the porcelain clinking softly against the counter, and crossed her arms. "Michael," she began, her voice steady but laced with a tremor of hope, "what do you think? 3 babies all at once." He looked up from his blueprints, the pencil in his hand pausing mid-scribble. The lines on his forehead deepened as he studied her, reading the flicker of excitement in her gray eyes. 3, he repeated, leaning back in his chair with a low whistle. "That's a hell of a leap, Jess. We've got the space, sure, but can we handle it? I mean, really handle it?" His tone was gruff, practical, but there was a softness beneath it, a crack in the armor of a man who'd long buried his dreams of fatherhood. She stepped closer, resting her hands on the table's edge, her fingers brushing the corner of a blueprint. "They're siblings," she said, her words firm yet tender. "Twins, 2 girls, and a little boy. The worker said their parents just left them. Couldn't he deal with how they looked, I guess? Brown skin, not like theirs." She paused, swallowing hard, her gaze dropping to the wood grain beneath her palms. "Can you imagine? Walking away from your own kids like that?" Michael's jaw tightened, his hand curling into a loose fist around the pencil. He'd heard the story from her earlier, the bare bones of it over breakfast, but the weight of it hit him now, sharp and raw. "Some folks can't face what is different," he muttered, his voice rough as gravel. "Doesn't he make it right? He pushed the blueprints aside, the papers rustling like dry leaves, and met her eyes. "You've already decided, haven't you?" Jessica smiled, a small, unguarded curve of her lips that lit up her tired face. "Maybe I have," she admitted, tucking a stray curl behind her ear. "I keep thinking about them, Michael. 3 little ones, alone in that hospital, no one to hold them. I can't shake it." Her voice dipped, softening to a near whisper. "We've got so much love to give. Why not them?" He exhaled, a long, slow breath that carried years of waiting. Standing, he crossed the room in 3 strides, his boots thudding against the floorboards, and pulled her into a hug. Her sweater felt soft against his rough hands as he rested his chin on her head. "All right," he said, his tone gruff but warm. "Let us go meet him. See what we're signing up for." She laughed a bright, fleeting sound and squeezed him back, the tension in her shoulders melting away. The next day, they drove to Oakwood S Hospital, the old pickup rattling over potholed roads as the countryside blurred past fields of green dotted with grazing cows, silos glinting in the midday sun. Jessica clutched a worn leather purse in her lap, her fingers tracing its stitching, while Michael kept one hand on the wheel, the other tapping a restless rhythm on his knee. The hospital loomed ahead, its brick facade softened by ivy creeping up the walls. Inside, the maternity ward smelled of bleach and baby powder, a sterile contrast to the earthy warmth of their home. A social worker named Clara Short, with a brisk walk and a clipboard, met them at the nurse's station, her glasses perched low on her nose. "They're right this way," Clara said, leading them down a hall lined with faded posters of smiling families. Her voice was clipped, professional, but her eyes softened as she glanced back. Been a tough few days for them. Parents signed the papers and left without a word. Poor dears haven't had much quiet since. She pushed open a door to a small room, its walls painted a chipmunk green. There, in a wide bassinet beneath a window, lay the triplets, nestled close under a patchwork blanket stitched with tiny stars. Jessica's breath caught as she stepped forward, her sneakers squeaking faintly on the linoleum. The babies were tiny, fragile bundles with tufts of dark hair curling against their warm brown skin. One girl slept with her thumb near her mouth, her chest rising in shallow bursts. The boy stirred, his eyes fluttering open to reveal a deep, searching brown, while the other girl kicked a leg free, her toes wiggling in the air. "Oh, Michael," Jessica whispered, her hand hovering over the bassinet's edge, trembling slightly. "Look at them." He stood beside her, his height casting a shadow across the blanket, and let out a low grunt of awe. "They're small," he said, almost to himself, his voice thick. He reached out, hesitant, and brushed a finger against the boy's cheek. The skin was velvet soft, warmer than he'd expected, and the baby cooed, a sound so faint it nearly drowned in the hum of the room's heater. Michael's throat bobbed as he swallowed, his usual stoicism cracking. "Real small?" Clara hovered nearby, flipping through her clipboard. "No names yet," she said, her pen tapping the paper. "The nurses have been calling them baby A, B, and C for now. Healthy, though born at term, no complications. Just need a home." She looked up, her gaze shifting between them. "You're thinking of taking all 3? Jessica nodded, her eyes never leaving the triplets. "They're a family," she said simply, her voice steady with resolve. "We can't split them up." Michael glanced at her, then back at the babies, his hand still resting near the boy's tiny fist. "Yeah," he added, quieter but firm. "All or nothing." Clara scribbled a note, a faint smile tugging at her lips. "I'll get the paperwork started," she said, stepping out with a brisk nod. "Take your time with them." The door clicked shut, leaving the Devises alone with the triplets. Jessica sank into a chair beside the bassinet, her fingers brushing the blanket's edge, feeling the rough weave against her skin. "What do we call them?" she asked, her voice bright with wonder. Michael crouched beside her, his knees creaking faintly, and studied the babies. "That one," he said, nodding at the boy. "He has got a fighter-esque look. Maybe Mason." Jessica tilted her head, considering, then pointed to the girl with the restless leg. "Hershey's feisty. Ava, I think." Her gaze shifted to the sleeping girl, serene even in the hospital's clamor. "And Sophia for this one. She has got a calm about her." He nodded, a slow grin spreading across his face. "Mason, Ava, Sophia," he repeated, testing the names. "Sounds right." They sat there, the jazz from a distant radio filtering through the walls, as the weight of their choice settled, a new chapter beginning in the hush of a hospital room, with 3 small lives now tethered to theirs. The Davis home buzzed with a new rhythm as summer unfurled over Willow Creek, the suburb-esque quiet streets alive with the hum of cicadas and the distant chatter of sprinklers. The yellow house on Maple Lane had transformed in the 2 years since the triplets arrived, its once tidy corners now softened by the chaos of childhood. The front porch sported a trio of tiny tricycles, red, blue, and green, their wheels scuffed from endless loops around the driveway. Inside, the cedar-scented floors bore faint crayon scribbles, and the living room's plaid sofa sagged under a heap of stuffed animals, a floppy-eared bunny, a threadbare bear, and a giraffe with one eye missing. The kitchen counter, once pristine, now held a fortress of sippy cups and a jar of homemade applesauce, its lid sticky from little hands. Jessica moved through this cheerful disorder with a practiced grace, her chestnut bun bobbing as she stirred a pot of oatmeal on the stove. The morning sun streamed through the window, glinting off her wire-rimmed glasses and casting golden patches on her faded apron. At 40, her laugh lines had deepened, etched by exhaustion and joy in equal measure. She hummed a lullaby under her breath, the melody weaving through the clatter of spoons and the triplets' chatter. Michael, meanwhile, knelt in the living room, his flannel shirt streaked with dust as he assembled a wooden playpen. His beard was fuller now, a rugged frame for the grin that tugged at his lips whenever he glanced at the children sprawled across a patchwork rug. Mason, Ava, and Sophia were a whirlwind of energy at 2 years old, their brown skin kissed by summer sun, their dark curls bouncing with every move. Mason sat cross-legged, his chubby fingers stacking a tower of wooden blocks, his brow furrowed in concentration. His hazel eyes, inherited, perhaps, from some distant ancestor, flickered with quiet determination, a peacemaker even now, as he built something steady amidst the storm of his sisters. Ava, bold and restless, darted around the room, her bare feet slapping the floor as she clutched a toy car, its wheels whirring as she raced it along the sofa's edge. Her laughter rang out, bright and unstoppable, a sound that could pierce the thickest silence. Sophia, the quietest, nestled against a cushion, her bunny tucked under one arm, her thumb brushing her lips as she watched her siblings with wide, thoughtful eyes. Jessica glanced over from the kitchen, her spoon pausing mid-stir. "Breakfast in 5, you little tornadoes," she called, her voice warm but firm. Ava skidded to a halt, her car bumping the playpen, and looked up with a mischievous grin. "Me fast, Mama," she declared, puffing out her chest. Michael chuckled, securing a screw with a twist of his wrist. "Fastest in the house, kiddo," he said, ruffling her curls as she scampered past. Mason glanced up, his tower wobbling, and added in a soft, serious tone, "I build big." Sophia clutched her bunny tighter, whispering, "Yummy soon?" Jessica smiled, her heart swelling at their voices so distinct, so alive. The early days of parenthood had been a blur of sleepless nights and endless diapers, but the Devises had found their footing. Michael had traded late shifts for early mornings, crafting cribs and shelves in his garage workshop to keep the house afloat with 3 new mouths. Jessica juggled her nursing shifts with a fierce efficiency, her hands as steady with a bottle as they'd once been with a scalpel. Yet beyond the walls of their home, the world watched with curious eyes. On a warm Saturday, they piled into the station wagon, its back seat now fitted with 3 car seats, and headed to Willow Creek's park, a sprawling green edge with oak trees and a duck pond shimmering in the heat. The park was alive with families, kids chasing frisbees, parents chatting on benches, the air thick with the scent of grilled hot dogs and fresh-cut grass. Jessica pushed a double stroller where Sophia and Mason sat, their heads tilted to watch the ducks, while Michael held Ava's hand as she tugged him toward the playground. Their arrival turned heads a white couple with 3 black toddlers, an uncommon sight in this small corner of the world. A woman in a floral sundress, her toddler clutching a pinwheel, paused mid-conversation to stare. She leaned toward her companion, a wiry man with a baseball cap, and murmured, "Those theirs? They don't match." Jessica caught the whisper, her grip tightening on the stroller's handles, but she kept her pace steady, her chin lifting slightly. Michael, ever the shield, glanced over his shoulder and called out, "Something to say, ma'am?" His tone was casual, but his eyes held a glint of steel. The woman flushed, her pinwheel spinning faster as she stammered, "Oh no, just cute kids." She turned away, busying herself with her son, but the exchange lingered like a sour note in the air. At the playground, Ava broke free, scrambling up a slide with a whoop, her sneakers squeaking against the metal. Mason toddled after, pausing to pat a patch of clover, his fingers brushing the soft petals with a scientist-esque curiosity. Sophia stayed close to Jessica, her bunny dangling from one hand as she pointed at a duck waddling near the pond. "Quack," she said softly, and Jessica knelt beside her, brushing a curl from her forehead. "That is right, sweet pea." "Quack, quack." She smiled, but her eyes scanned the park, catching the sidelong glances, the hushed murmurs that followed them like shadows. Later, as they settled on a blanket with a picnic of peanut butter sandwiches and apple slices, a gray-haired man approached, his cane tapping the grass. He wore a faded veteran-esque cap and a kind, withered smile. "Fine family you've got," he said, nodding at the triplets. "Reminds me of my grandkids full of spunk." Michael looked up, his guarded expression softening. "Thanks," he said, handing Ava a sandwich she promptly smeared across her cheek. "They keep us on our toes." The man chuckled, tipping his cap. "Good thing, too. World needs more like him." He shuffled off, leaving a warmth that eased the sting of earlier stares. Jessica leaned against Michael, her shoulder brushing his, and watched the kids, Mason stacking twigs, Ava chasing a butterfly, Sophia nibbling an apple slice with delicate bites. "They're ours," she said quietly, her voice a mix of pride and defiance. "No matter what anyone thinks." Michael draped an arm around her, his calloused hand resting on her back. "Damn right," he murmured, his gaze steady on the triplets. "Ours through and through." The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the park, and the Devises sat together, a small island in a sea of whispers, their bond forged stronger by the day. Back home at night, as the triplets slept in their shared room cribs lined against a wall painted with stars, the house settled into a gentle hush, its creaks and sighs a lullaby for a family finding its shape. Autumn swept into Willow Creek with a crisp edge, turning the suburb's oak trees into a blaze of amber and rust. The Davis home stood steadfast on Maple Lane, its yellow exterior softened by a scattering of fallen leaves across the porch. Inside, the living room buzzed with the nervous energy of a milestone mourning the triplets' first day of preschool. The cedar floors gleamed under a fresh polish, though a faint smudge of grape jelly lingered near the sofa, a remnant of Ava's breakfast antics. A row of tiny backpacks, red for Mason, purple for Ava, and teal for Sophia, hung on hooks by the door, each stuffed with a lunchbox, a spare sweater, and a lovingly folded note from Jessica. The kitchen hummed with the clink of dishes as she rinsed oatmeal bowls, her chestnut bun pinned high to keep stray curls from her flushed face. At 41, Jessica's hands moved with the quiet efficiency of a seasoned nurse, though her gray eyes flickered with a mother's tender worry. She wore a denim skirt and a cream blouse, its sleeves rolled up from the morning rush. Michael, now 44, stood by the stairs, adjusting the straps of Mason's backpack with a carpenter's precision. His flannel shirt stretched across his broad frame, and his beard, thick with gray, framed a reassuring smile. The triplets, for years old and brimming with restless energy, darted around the room like fireflies in a jar. Mason tugged at his sneakers, his dark curls bouncing as he tested the Velcro straps with a satisfied grunt. Ava spun in circles, her purple skirt flaring, her laughter a high-pitched chime that echoed off the walls. Sophia clung to Jessica's leg, her teal backpack dwarfing her slight frame, her bunny tucked under one arm as she chewed her lip. "Everybody ready?" Michael called, his deep voice cutting through the chaos. He hoisted Ava onto his shoulder, her giggles erupting as she clutched his collar. "First day's a big deal, right?" Mason nodded solemnly, standing tall with his backpack squared like a soldier reporting for duty. "Big," he agreed, his hazel eyes bright with curiosity. Sophia, though, tightened her grip on Jessica's skirt, her voice a whisper. "Mama, what if they don't like me?" Her brown eyes, wide and searching, glistened with unshed tears, a shadow of doubt clouding her usual calm. Jessica knelt, the denim stretching across her knees, and brushed a curl from Sophia's forehead. "Oh, sweet pea," she said, her tone soft as a lullaby, "they'll love you. You're kind and smart, and you've got your bunny to keep you company." She tapped the stuffed animal's nose, coaxing a small smile from Sophia. "But if I'm different?" The girl pressed, her fingers twisting the bunny's ear. Jessica's heart squeezed. She'd known this day might come, the moment their differences sharpened into questions. "Different as what makes you special," she said firmly, cupping Sophia's cheek. "You're our Sophia, and that's enough." Michael joined them, lowering Ava to the floor with a playful bounce. "Listen to your mama," he said, crouching to Sophia's level, his knees popping faintly. "School's full of kids all kinds, all colors. You'll fit right in, I promise." He winked, and Sophia's smile grew, tentative but real. The clock chimed 8, and Jessica stood, clapping her hands. "Time to go, crew. Shoes on, let us roll." The triplets scrambled to obey, their sneakers squeaking as they lined up by the door, a trio of eager faces framed by the morning light. Willow Creek Preschool sat a mile away, a low brick building with a playground fenced in bright red netting. Its windows glowed with construction paper leaves taped in haphazard rows, and the air carried the scent of chalk dust and freshly sharpened pencils. Jessica parked the station wagon in a gravel lot, her hand steady on the wheel despite the flutter in her chest. Michael unbuckled the kids, his callous fingers deft as he lifted them one by one onto the pavement. Inside, the classroom buzzed with chattered children stacking blocks, parents snapping photos, a teacher with a clipboard weaving through the crowd. The walls were a riot of color, murals of smiling suns, alphabet charts, and a fish tank gurgling in the corner. Miss Harper, a young woman with a bob of blonde hair and a polka-dot dress, greeted them with a grin. "Mason, Ava, and Sophia, right?" she said, checking her list. "Welcome. We've got cubbies ready to pick your spots." Ava bolted forward, claiming a cubby with a triumphant mine, while Mason followed at a measured pace, his fingers brushing the wood as if testing its strength. Sophia hesitated, her bunny dangling from one hand, until Jessica nudged her gently. "Go on, sweetie. You've got this." The girl nodded, stepping forward with a shaky breath, her backpack swaying as she chose a cubby near Mason S. The other parents milled about, their voices a low hum of small talk. A woman in a crisp blazer, her son tugging at her sleeve, caught sight of the devices and paused. She leaned toward a friend, her voice a stage whisper. "Those three with them? Adopted, I bet. Odd match, isn't it?" Jessica S. shoulders stiffened, her grip on Michael S. arm tightening, but she kept her eyes on the triplets as they explored the room. Michael turned, his jaw set, and called over, "They're ours, lady." "Got a problem with that?" His tone was even, but the edge in it silenced her. She flushed, muttering an apology as she steered her son toward the blocks. Miss Harper clapped her hands, her voice bright. "All right, parents, time to say goodbye. We'll take good care of them." Ava waved with both hands, her grin wide, while Mason offered a small, serious nod. Sophia clung to Jessica's leg again, her eyes darting to the other kids, a sea of unfamiliar faces. "Mama, stay?" she whispered, her voice trembling. Jessica knelt once more, her blouse brushing the floor. "Just for a little bit, then I'll be back. You'll have fun. Look, they've got paints over there." She pointed to a table streaked with red and blue, and Sophia's gaze followed, a spark of interest flickering. Michael ruffled Sophia's curls, his hand gentle but firm. "You're brave, kiddo. Show 'em what you've got." He stood, offering Jessica a hand, and they stepped back, watching as Sophia took a tentative step toward the paints, her bunny clutched tight. The other kids swarmed around, some staring, others oblivious, but Mason stayed close, his quiet presence a shield, while Ava's laughter drew a small crowd. As the parents filtered out, Jessica lingered by the door, peering through the glass. "She'll be okay, right?" she murmured, her breath fogging the pain. Michael squeezed her shoulder, his touch warm through her blouse. "She is tougher than she looks," he said, his voice low and sure. "They all are." They walked to the car, the gravel crunching underfoot, and drove home in a thoughtful silence, the weight of this new chapter settling over them. Back at the house, the living room felt emptier without the triplets' clamor, but the backpack's absence on the hooks whispered of growth of a family stretching into the world, one small step at a time. That afternoon, when they returned, Sophia ran to Jessica, her hands streaked with paint, a shy smile breaking through. "I made a son," she said, holding up a crumpled paper smeared with yellow. Ava chattered about a slide, Mason showed a block he'd kept in his pocket, and the devices gathered them close, their laughter filling the car. The day had tested them, but it had also bound them tighter, a thread of courage woven through their love. Winter draped Willow Creek in a quilt of frost, the suburb's streets glistening under a pale January sun. The Davis home on Maple Lane stood warm against the chill, its yellow siding framed by icicles that dripped like glass tears from the eaves. Inside, the living room glowed with the flicker of a fireplace, its crackling logs casting dancing shadows across the cedar floors. The plaid sofa, now patched at one arm, cradled a heap of library books, tales of robots, track stars, and musical prodigies, while the kitchen hummed with the scent of simmering beef stew, its steam fogging the window above the sink. A small Christmas tree lingered in the corner, its needles shedding onto a rug dusted with glitter from Ava's latest craft project. Jessica, now 43, moved through the house with a quiet rhythm, her chestnut hair streaked with silver and pulled into a loose braid. Her nursing scrubs hung in the closet tonight, traded for a thick sweater and jeans, her hands busy threading a needle to mend Sophia's favorite scarf. Michael, 45, lounged in an armchair by the fire, his flannel shirt unbuttoned over a thermal tee, his beard a rugged frame for the grin he flashed at the triplets. The kids, 7 years old and bursting with restless curiosity, filled the room with their own brand of chaos. Mason hunched over the coffee table, his dark curls falling into his eyes, as he tinkered with a model robot, its gears clicking under his careful fingers. Ava paced near the window, her sneakers leaving faint scuff marks as she mimicked a sprinter's stance, her breath fogging the glass. Sophia sat cross-legged by the hearth, her fingers dancing over a toy piano, its tinny notes weaving a halting melody through the air. The elementary years had brought a new cadence to the DeVises' lives. Mason, Ava, and Sophia attended Willow Creek Elementary, a squat brick school with a playground patched with snow and classrooms buzzing with multiplication drills. Their passions had bloomed like wildflowers through cracked pavement. Mason's love for science sparked by a robotics kit Michael had built with him. Ava's speed honed on the school's muddy track. Sophia's quiet devotion to music born from a second-hand keyboard Jessica had found at a thrift shop. The house reflected their growth. A corner of the garage now a workshop littered with screws and wires, the backyard streaked with Ava's running paths, the living room shelf sagging under Sophia's sheet music. Jessica glanced up from her sewing, the needle pausing mid-stitch. "Dinner's almost ready," she called, her voice carrying over Sophia's tune. Hands washed, instruments down, let us move. Ava spun toward her, her curls bouncing, and grinned. "I'm starving, Mama. Ran 10 laps today, beat Tommy Carter." She flexed an arm, her sleeve sliding up to reveal a scrape from a tumble she'd shrugged off. Michael chuckled, setting aside a newspaper he'd barely read. "Future Olympian right there," he said, winking at her. "Keep that speed up, kiddo." Mason looked up, his robot's arm twitching as he tightened a screw. "I fixed the claw," he announced, his voice steady with pride. "It grabs stuff now, wanna see?" He held up the contraption, its metal fingers snapping shut around the pencil. Sophia paused her playing, her scarf trailing across her lap, and clapped softly. "Cool, Mason," she said, her tone warm but shy. "Mine's just loud." She tapped a key, a sharp note ringing out, and giggled a rare, bright sound that lit her thoughtful face. The evening settled into a cozy routine dinner around the oak table, spoons clinking against bowls, the triplets trading stories of schoolyard triumphs. But as the fire dwindled to embers, a question shifted the air. Mason set his spoon down, his brow furrowing as he stared at the table's grain. "Mama, Dad," he began, his voice quieter than usual, "where do we come from?" "Like before you?" The room stilled, Ava's chatter fading, Sophia's fingers freezing on her scarf. Jessica and Michael exchanged a glance, their years of anticipating this moment crystallizing in the silence. Jessica set her mug down, the porcelain clinking softly, and leaned forward, her braid brushing the table. "You mean your birth parents?" she asked, her tone gentle but direct. Mason nodded, his hazel eyes flickering with a mix of curiosity and unease. Ava tilted her head, her spoon dangling midair. "Yeah, like did they not want us 'cause we're brown?" Her bluntness cut through the hush, and Sophia shrank back, her scarf pulled tight around her shoulders like a shield. Michael cleared his throat, resting his elbows on the table, his hands clasped as if anchoring himself. "It's not that simple," he said, his voice low and steady. "They had you 2 girls and a boy, and they weren't ready. Couldn't he handle the surprise, maybe? But it wasn't about you being you. They just couldn't see past themselves." He paused, searching their faces, his rugged features softening. "We got the call after they left. Saw you 3, and knew you were ours, no question." Jessica reached out, her hand covering Mason's smaller one, her fingers warm against his. "You were so tiny," she said, a smile tugging at her lips. "Wrapped up together in one big bassinet, like you were keeping each other safe. We chose you not because we had to, but because we wanted to. You're our family, brown skin and all." Her voice held a quiet strength, a thread of love woven through every word. Sophia's eyes glistened, her voice a whisper. "Did they ever say sorry?" She hugged her knees, the scarf slipping to the floor. Jessica shook her head, her braids swaying. "No, sweet pea. They signed some papers and went away. But that's their story, not yours. Yours started with us." Ava frowned, dropping her spoon with a clatter. "Dumb," she muttered, crossing her arms. "They missed out. We're awesome." Her defiance sparked a laugh from Michael, a deep rumble that eased the tension. "Damn right you're awesome," he said, reaching over to tousle her curls. "Best kids in Willow Creek, maybe the world." Mason grinned, his robot forgotten as he leaned into Jessica's side. "So we're stuck with you," he teased, his tone lightening. Jessica squeezed his hand, her laugh soft. "Stuck forever, buddy. No getting rid of us." The fire popped, sending a shower of sparks up the chimney, and the triplets settled into the warmth of the moment. Later, as they sprawled on the rug with their passion, Sophia's piano plinking a new tune, Ava racing a toy car across the floor, Mason tweaking his robot-esque gears, the question lingered, a quiet echo in their young minds. Jessica watched them, her needle moving through the scarf's fabric, and felt a pang of pride. They were growing, stretching toward their own paths, yet rooted in the love she and Michael had planted. Outside, the frost thickened on the grass, the night sky a tapestry of stars above the suburb's rooftops. The Davis home stood as a beacon, its windows aglow with the light of a family forging its own story, one of discovery, resilience, and the unbreakable ties that held them fast, no matter where they'd begun. Spring breathed new life into Willow Creek, the suburb's streets lined with cherry blossoms that shed pink petals like confetti onto the sidewalks. The Davis home on Maple Lane stood vibrant amidst the bloom, its yellow siding bright against a sky streaked with wispy clouds. Inside, the living room thrummed with the energy of adolescence, the cedar floors scuffed from years of restless feet. The plaid sofa sagged under a pile of backpacks, red for Mason, purple for Ava, teal for Sophia, each bulging with textbooks and crumpled permission slips. The kitchen counter held a pitcher of lemonade, its glass sweating in the warmth, while a bulletin board above it pinned a kaleidoscope of concert flyers, track meet schedules, and robotics club notices. Jessica, now 45, leaned against the counter, her silver-streaked braid falling over a navy blouse, her hands cradling a mug of tea. Her laugh lines had deepened, a map of a life rich with care, though her gray eyes flickered with a quiet vigilance as she watched the triplets. Michael, 47, sprawled in a chair by the window, his flannel shirt unbuttoned over a faded tee, his beard a thick bristle framing a thoughtful frown. The triplets, 11 years old and teetering on the edge of teenage rebellion, filled the house with their distinct rhythms. Mason tinkered at the dining table, his wiry frame bent over a circuit board, his dark curls shadowing his focused gaze. Ava stretched near the fireplace, her sneakers squeaking as she practiced a runner's lunge, her breath puffing with exertion. Sophia sat on the rug, her fingers tracing the strings of a violin she'd begged for last Christmas. It's about coaxing a hesitant note from the instrument. Middle school had ushered in a new chapter at Willow Creek Junior High, a sprawling campus with locker-lined halls and a gymnasium echoing with squeaking sneakers. The Triplets, now in 6th grade, navigated its chaos with growing confidence. Mason's robotics team earning ribbons, Ava's track record shattering expectations, Sophia's violin solos stealing breaths at recitals. Their passions had carved spaces in a world that sometimes stared too long, their brown skin a quiet contrast to the suburb's pale majority. The Devises had grown accustomed to the occasional murmur, the sidelong glance, but this spring day brought a sharper test. It started in history class, a room thick with the scent of old books and whiteboard markers, its walls plastered with maps and timelines. The teacher, Mr. Grayson, a balding man with a penchant for tangents, lectured on immigration, his chalk tapping the board. Sophia sat near the window, her violin case tucked under her desk, her teal notebook open to a sketch of a musical staff. Mason slouched beside her, his pencil doodling gears, while Ava fidgeted in the back, her leg bouncing under the table. A classmate, Tyler, a lanky boy with a smirk and a mop of blonde hair, leaned over, his voice a low jab. "Hey, Sophia, where's your family really from? You don't look like your parents." The room hushed, heads turning as Sophia froze, her pencil snapping in her grip. Her brown eyes widened, a flush creeping up her neck. Mason straightened, his circuit board calm replaced by a protective glare, while Ava's legs stilled, her fists clenching. "What is that supposed to mean?" Sophia asked, her voice tight but steady, the violin bow trembling in her lap. Tyler shrugged, his smirk widening. "Just saying your mom and dad are white. You guys don't match." "What is the deal?" Mason cut in, his tone sharp as a blade. "The deal is they're our parents. Adopted us, end of story." His words landed hard, but Tyler pressed on, undeterred. "Yeah, but where do you come from before that? Africa or something?" A few kids snickered, the sound grating against the hum of the overhead lights. Ava shot to her feet, her chair scraping the floor. "Shut up, Tyler," she snapped, her eyes blazing. "We're from here, same as you. Got a problem, take it outside." Mr. Grayson turned, his chalk pausing mid-scroll. "Enough," he barked, his voice cutting through the tension. "Tyler, sit down. We're talking history, not gossip." The boy slouched back, his smirk fading, but the damage lingered in Sophia's hunched shoulders, Mason's clenched jaw, Ava's coiled energy. When the bell rang, the Triplets filed out, their silence heavy, as they trudged home through the petal-strewn streets, the confrontation replaying in their minds. That evening, the living room crackled with an undercurrent of unease. Sophia sat curled on the sofa, her violin resting beside her, her fingers twisting a strand of hair. Ava paced near the window, her sneakers thudding softly, while Mason knelt by his circuit board, though his hands stayed idle. Jessica caught the shift, setting her mug down with a gentle clink. "Rough day?" she asked, her voice a calm anchor as she crossed to sit beside Sophia. Mason nodded, his gaze fixed on the table. "Some jerk at school asked about our real family," he muttered, his tone bitter. "Like you and Dad aren't it?" Michael looked up, his newspaper rustling as he set it aside. "Who is this jerk?" he asked, his voice low but edged with steel. Ava spun around, her arms crossing. "Tyler. Said we don't look like you 'cause we're brown?" Sophia shut him down, but he kept going. Sophia shrank deeper into the cushions, her voice small. I told him you're our parents. He didn't care, just wanted to know where we're really from. Jessica's hand found Sophia's, her touch warm and steady. You did good, sweet pea, she said, her gray eyes fierce with pride. You don't owe anyone an explanation. You're ours, full stop. Michael leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, his rugged face softening. This Tyler kid, he is fishing for trouble. Doesn't he change who we are? You three are devices, brown skin or not. Anyone says different, they're wrong. Mason shifted, his circuit board clattering as he pushed it aside. But what about before? He asked, his voice tentative but firm. Like our roots? Not them, the ones who left, but where our brown comes from. I want to know. His hazel eyes met Jessica's, a spark of curiosity cutting through the hurt. Ava paused her pacing, her head tilting. Yeah, like are we African or something? Tyler's dumb, but it got me thinking. Sophia looked up, her fingers stilling. Does it matter? She whispered, her tone uncertain. Jessica smiled, a soft curve that held years of love. It can, if you wanted to, she said, brushing Sophia's cheek. Your birth parents didn't tell us much, just that they couldn't stay. But you're brown? That essay story worth knowing. Could be African, could be a mixed history as full of threads like that. She glanced at Michael, a silent question passing between them. He nodded, rising to grab a book from the shelf, a worn volume on American history, its spine creased from use. Here essay start, he said, handing it to Mason. Lots of folks came here from Africa, strong people, builders, survivors. Maybe that's part of you. We can dig deeper if you want, libraries, museums, whatever you need. Mason took the book, his fingers tracing the cover, a new light in his eyes. Cool, he said, flipping it open. Can we, Mom? Like a project? Jessica laughed, her braids swaying. A project it is, she said, pulling Ava and Sophia into a loose hug. We'll figure it out together, your roots, your way. Ava grinned, her tension easing. As long as I can run while we do it, she quipped, dodging Sophia's playful swat. The room softened, the sting of Tyler's words fading into the warmth of their circle, the triplets' questions a bridge to something bigger. Outside, the cherry blossoms drifted on the breeze, a quiet promise of spring's renewal. Inside, the Devises turned a challenge into a journey, their home a haven where identity could bloom, rooted in love and reaching toward truth. Fall swept through Willow Creek with a blaze of crimson and gold, the suburb's streets carpeted with leaves that crunched underfoot. The Davis home on Maple Lane stood proud amidst the season's glow, its yellow siding weathered but cheerful, framed by a porch now adorned with a weathered swing and a cluster of pumpkins carved with lopsided grins. Inside, the living room pulsed with the vitality of teenage life, the cedar floors bearing the scars of years' faint gouges from Ava's track cleats, a burn mark from Mason's soldering iron. The plaid sofa groaned under a pile of hoodies and school binders, while the kitchen thrummed with the scent of roasted garlic wafting from a lasagna Jessica had slid into the oven. A corkboard above the counter bristled with concert programs, track medals, and a robotics competition flyer, each a testament to the triplets' burgeoning paths. Jessica, now 48, stood at the stove, her silver streaked braids swaying as she stirred a pot of marinara, her navy scrubs swapped for a cozy cardigan. Her gray eyes sparkled with a mix of exhaustion and pride, her hands steady from decades of nursing now seasoned by years of parenting. Michael, 50, leaned against the doorway, his flannel shirt rolled to the elbows, his beard a thick salt and pepper frame for a grin that deepened his crow's feet. The triplets, 15 and thriving in their sophomore year at Willow Creek High, filled the house with their distinct energies. Mason hunched over the dining table, his lean frame bent over a half-built robot, its wires spilling like veins across the wood. Ava stretched in the living room, her track uniform clinging to her sweat-damp skin, her breath puffing as she cooled down from a run. Sophia perched on a stool, her violin tucked under her chin, its bow gliding across the strings in a haunting melody that danced with a fire-esque crackle. High school had sharpened their talents into something undeniable. Mason's robotics team had clinched a regional title, his latest creation a sleek rover with a grasping arm earning whispers of college scouts. Ava's speed had turned heads on the track, her relay team eyeing a state championship, her strides a blur of power and grace. Sophia's violin had found a home in the school orchestra, her solos weaving through auditoriums with a quiet intensity that left audiences hushed. Their brown skin, once a point of stares in this pale suburb, now framed their triumphs, a badge of resilience etched into every ribbon, medal, and standing ovation. The evening settled into a familiar hum, plates clattering as Jessica served dinner, the triplets trading jabs about homework and practice schedules. But the weekend promised something bigger. The Willow Creek Harvest Fair, a tradition of hayrides, cider stands, and a talent showcase under a canopy of twinkling lights. The triplets had signed up Mason to demo his rover, Ava to race in a charity sprint, Sophia to perform with the orchestra, and the devices buzzed with anticipation. Saturday dawned crisp and clear, the air thick with the scent of apples and wood smoke as the fairground sprawled across the town square, its booths draped in burlap and strung with amber bulbs. The crowd milled about, kids clutching caramel apples, parents sipping steaming mugs, the chatter mingling with a fiddle band's lively tune. Mason set up near the pavilion, his rover whirring as it rolled across a makeshift track, its arm snagging a foam ball to cheers from onlookers. Ava warmed up by the race lane, her sneakers kicking up dust, her eyes narrowed with focus as she stretched her hamstrings. Sophia tuned her violin backstage, her fingers trembling slightly, her teal scarf a gift from Jessica draped over her shoulders like a talisman. Jessica and Michael wove through the throng, their hands brushing as they carried folding chairs, their pride a quiet glow in their weathered faces. The sprint came first, a 100-yard dash pitting Ava against local teens. The starter's whistle pierced the air, and she launched forward, her legs a piston blur, her curls streaming behind her. The crowd roared as she crossed the line first, dust swirling in her wake, her grin fierce as she pumped a fist. "That's my girl," Michael bellowed, his voice rising above the cheers, while Jessica clapped, her cardigan slipping off one shoulder. Ava jogged over, sweat beading on her brow, and hugged them both. "Told you I'd smoke him," she panted, her laughter bright against the evening chill. Mason's demo followed, his rover navigating obstacles, a ramp, a sand pit, its arm plucking a flag to applause. A gray-haired man in a tweed jacket, a college recruiter, scribbled notes, his nod a silent promise of future calls. "Nice work, son," Michael said, clapping Mason's shoulder as the boy packed up, his hazel eyes gleaming with quiet triumph. "It's the gears," Mason replied, a rare grin breaking his focus. "Took me 3 tries, but they're perfect now." Sophia's turn came last, the orchestra filing onto a stage framed by hay bales. The lights dimmed, the crowd hushing as her bow touched the strings, a slow, aching note rising into the night. Her solo a piece she decomposed wove through the air, its melody a thread of longing and strength, her brown fingers steady despite the spotlight's glare. When the final note faded, silence held for a heartbeat before applause erupted, a wave that lifted her shy smile. Jessica's eyes glistened, her hand finding Michael's. While he whispered, "She has something else, Jess." As the fair wound down, the Devises gathered near a cider stand, the triplets sipping from steaming cups, their faces flushed with victory. A woman approached, middle-aged, her coat buttoned tight, her gaze lingering too long. "Quite a family," she said, her tone teetering between awe and skepticism. "You're their parents, I assume?" "Unusual, isn't it?" Jessica's smile tightened, but her voice stayed even. "Not unusual to us," she said, her arm sliding around Sophia. "Their ours always have been." The woman blinked, taken aback, then nodded awkwardly. "Well, they're talented, that's for sure," she mumbled, retreating into the crowd. Ava rolled her eyes, nudging Mason. "Why do people care?" she muttered, sipping her cider. "We're just us." Mason shrugged, his robot cradled under one arm. "Dunno. Guess they're not used to awesome." Sophia giggled, her scarf slipping as she leaned into Jessica. "They'll all get over it," she said softly, her confidence a quiet bloom. Michael chuckled, pulling them all into a loose huddle, his flannel brushing their shoulders. "Let him stare," he said, his voice a rumble of warmth. "You three light up this town, nothing unusual about that." The fair-ass lights twinkled above, the fiddle band striking up a final reel, and the Devises stood together, their triumphs a shield against old whispers, their bond a beacon in the autumn night. Back home, the living room settled into a gentle hush. The triplets sprawled with their spoils, Ava's metal gleaming, Mason's rover humming, Sophia's violin resting on its stand. Jessica and Michael sat by the fire, their hands entwined, the day's victories a quiet song in their hearts. The house creaked softly, its walls holding a decade of their story, as the triplets' high school years stretched toward a horizon bright with promise. Summer draped Willow Creek in a golden shroud, the suburb's streets shimmering under a sun that baked the asphalt into waves of heat. The Davis home on Maple Lane stood as a weathered sentinel, its yellow siding softened by time, the porch swaying gently in a breeze tinged with the scent of honeysuckle. Inside, the living room radiated a quiet pride, the cedar floors gleaming despite years of wear scratches from Ava's track shoes, a dent from Mason's tools. The plaid sofa, freshly upholstered in dove gray, cradled a scattering of college acceptance letters, while the kitchen pulsed with the aroma of peach cobbler, its crust browning in the oven. A gallery of photos lined the walls, Mason with his robotics trophies, Ava mid-stride on the track, Sophia bowing after a concert, each frame a milestone etched in love. Jessica, now 52, stood by the counter, her silver-streaked braid glinting as she sliced peaches, her cardigan slipping off one shoulder. Her gray eyes held a blend of joy and contemplation, her hands steady from years of nursing now seasoned by motherhood's trials. Michael, 54, leaned against the fridge, his flannel shirt open over a faded tee, his white beard framing a face creased with contentment. The triplets, 19 and poised on the brink of their futures, filled the house with their vibrant presence. Mason, lanky and focused, adjusted a drone-esque propeller at the dining table, his dark curls falling into his hazel eyes. Ava, toned and restless, stretched on the rug, her shorts revealing a runner's legs as she scrolled stats on her phone. Sophia, graceful and calm, tuned her violin by the window, its strings humming a melody that mingled with the cicadas' drone outside. Their high school years had blossomed into early successes. Mason, a mechanical engineering freshman, had secured a prestigious internship, his drone prototype a sleek marble drawing industry praise. Ava, thriving on a college track team, had signed a sponsorship deal, her relay times eyeing Olympic trials. Sophia, at a conservatory, had returned from a summer tour, her compositions earning accolades and a full scholarship. Their brown skin, once a murmur in Willow Creek, now framed their achievements, a testament to resilience, a quiet rebuttal to an abandoned past. This July afternoon was a celebration, a backyard gathering to honor Jessica and Michael, a tribute from the Triplets for a lifetime of support. The yard buzzed with set-up tables cloaked in red checkered cloth, a grill smoking with ribs, a cooler brimming with iced tea. Neighbors arrived, their laughter weaving through the air, their nods warm with admiration. Mason launched his drone, its blade slicing the sky as it unfurled a banner. To Mom and Dad, our foundation. Ava dashed about, stacking plates, her grin fierce as she hugged Jessica. "You're the best," she said, her voice a bright thread in the clamor. Sophia handed Michael a leather journal, its cover embossed with "For Dad, our guide." "For all the advice," she murmured, her eyes soft with gratitude. Jessica's laugh bubbled up, her hands pulling them into a tight embrace. "You've made us so proud," she said, her voice thick with emotion. Michael wrapped an arm around her, his throat tight. "Couldn't he ask for more?" he rumbled, his gaze lingering on the Triplets' legacy in their every step. The party swelled, a symphony of clinking glasses and heartfelt toasts. The Triplets' success is a living thank you for every late night, every cheer, every tear. But as the sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the lawn, Jessica's expression shifted, a flicker of unease tightening her features. She set down a tray of cobbler, wiping her hands on a towel, and called the Triplets to the porch. "Mason, Ava, Sophia, come here a minute," she said, her tone calm but weighted, drawing them from the crowd. Michael joined her, his brow furrowing as he sensed the shift, his hand resting on her shoulder. The Triplets gathered, their chatter fading, their eyes searching hers. Mason's steady, Ava's curious, Sophia's cautious. Jessica took a breath, her braids swaying as she met their gazes. "I got a call last week," she began, her voice measured. "From a social worker in Oakwood. It's about your birth parents, Eleanor and Thomas Brown." The name hung in the air, a ghost from a distant past, stirring a ripple of tension. Ava's phone slipped to her lap, Mason's drone controller stilled, Sophia's violin bow trembled. "They're in a bad spot," Jessica continued, her hands clasping tight. "Lost everything, house, savings, and some scam they fell for years back. They're old now, broke and sick. The worker asked if you consider helping." Michael's jaw tightened, his voice low. "Didn't he have to tell you?" he said, his eyes on the Triplets. "But your mom thought you should know. It's your call." The yard's laughter faded to a distant hum, the weight of the moment settling over them. Ava leaned forward, her brow furrowing. "Help them? After they ditched us?" Her tone was sharp, but a flicker of doubt softened it. Mason set his controller down, his voice even. "What kind of help? Like money?" Sophia hugged her violin case, her whisper faint. "Why us? They never cared." Jessica nodded, her gray eyes steady. "They didn't back then. Scared, selfish, whatever it was, they walked away. Now they're paying for it alone, no family, barely scraping by. The worker said they've got medical bills piling up, no insurance. They're not asking directly, don't even know I'm talking to you. But I thought you're adults now. You deserve to decide." The Triplets sat in silence, the porch swing creaking faintly as they processed her words. Ava crossed her arms, her runner's frame tense. "They don't deserve it," she said, her voice clipped. "Dumped us 'cause we weren't white enough for him. Why should we care?" Mason tilted his head, his fingers tracing the drone's edge. "Maybe 'cause we're not like them," he mused, his tone thoughtful. We've got more jobs futures. Couldn't we spare something? Sophia looked up, her brown eyes glistening. I don't hate them, she said softly. I just don't know them. But if they're hurting? Jessica watched them, her heart swelling at their wrestle with compassion. You don't owe them anything, she said, her voice firm. What they did was wrong, cowardly. But you're not them. You built something better. Michael nodded, his hand squeezing her shoulder. Your hearts are bigger than theirs ever were, he added, his rumble warm. Whatever you choose, we're behind you. Ava exhaled, her tension easing as she glanced at her siblings. Okay, fine, she said, her defiance softening. Not 'cause they're family, they're not. But 'cause we can. I'll pitch and sell some gear or whatever. Mason nodded, pulling out his phone. I've got internship pay, he said, scrolling through his account. Could send a chunk every month, keep him afloat. Sophia set her violin aside, her voice steadying. My tour money, I'll add it. Not for them, really for us. So we know we're bigger than their mistake. Jessica's eyes misted, her hand covering her mouth as pride surged. You sure? She asked, her tone gentle. This be ongoing till they're gone. It's a lot. Ava shrugged, a faint grin tugging her lips. We're tough, Mom. We'll handle it. Mason met her gaze, his resolve firm. It's not about forgiving, just doing what is right. Sophia smiled, small but sure. They gave us up. We're getting back our way. Michael chuckled, his arm pulling Jessica close. Raised him damn well, he murmured, his voice thick. Jessica nodded, her braid brushing his chest. Better than we hoped, she whispered, watching as Mason texted the social worker. Ava calculated her funds, and Sophia jotted a note for her next deposit. They agreed on a modest stipend enough for essentials and medical care sent monthly, no strings, no reunion, a quiet act of grace from a distance. The party resumed, the night deepening with fireflies and laughter, the triplets rejoining the celebration with lighter steps. Jessica and Michael stood on the porch, hands entwined, the cobbler's warmth a sweet finish to a day of reckoning. They're incredible, she said, her eyes tracing their grown children. Michael squeezed her hand, his voice a low hum. Always were just took growing up to prove it. The Davis home glowed, its walls a testament to love and redemption, as the triplets strode into their future successful, generous, and free, their past a shadow they outshone with light.